The citrus cleaner still lingered on the counter as my daughter-in-law smiled sweetly and said, "We need peace. Leave." As I folded the towel with calm fingers, she didn't notice I was standing in the house I built before she met my son. While her voice stayed silky, the lemon scent thickened, too sharp, too staged, like a lie sprayed into the air. The same cleaner I once bought for her now smelled like a warning dressed as hospitality. That's when I knew she wasn't asking, I just wasn't supposed to outlast her timing. So I left the room, not the house, and took the deed, the history, and her future with me. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The mug was gone again. I stood by the sink a moment too long, blinking at the cupboard like I'd somehow missed it. The navy blue one with the chipped handle, my mug, had vanished. In its place sat something glossy and new, white with gold script, "Guests welcome." I ran my thumb across the counter, brushing away a few stray crumbs no one else ever seemed to notice. Tessa was already there, perched on one of the stools like she'd been waiting. She looked perfectly arranged, as always, hair tucked just so behind one ear, manicured fingers curled around her green smoothie, not a crease in her cardigan. "I spoke with Miles," she began, soft but firm like a teacher rehearsing her lines before parent-teacher night. "We think it's time for a more peaceful environment." Her voice didn't rise, it never did. That was part of the performance, make it sound like wisdom, like concern, never accusation. I turned slowly, letting the silence land first. "And by peaceful," I said, folding the dish towel in my hands, "you mean me leaving?" She smiled faintly. I'd seen warmer expressions at funerals. "It's not personal, Joan, we just need space to grow. You deserve rest, stability, a chance to breathe without all this tension." I nodded just once. She waited for a fight. They always expect that in the end. They prep for fireworks so they can tell the story their way later. I gave her none. Instead, I reached for the sponge and began wiping the edge of the counter. Long, even strokes. The citrus cleaner smelled too sweet, Tessa's favorite brand, it always left a residue. "I appreciate the clarity," I said, not looking up. "Clarity's important." "I knew you'd understand," she replied, her tone that carefully masked blend of triumph and pity. "This is healthier for everyone." Healthier, peaceful, boundaries, all the new age code words that made betrayal sound like progress. She slid off the stool and padded out of the kitchen, slippered feet silent against the hardwood. No backward glance, no thank you. I watched the spot she'd left, then opened the cabinet and moved the guest's welcome mug to the far back corner, not out of spite, just making room for the space I'd earned. Upstairs, the floor creaked gently. Hazel. I could always tell when it was her, the light tread, the small pause outside her door like she was making sure no one was listening. 12 going on 40, too observant for her own good. I walked up slowly, each step measured. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I paused anyway outside her room. Her door was open, just a crack, enough to see the side of her bed, the cluttered nightstand, her sneakers kicked halfway under the dresser. She wasn't there. But something was. On her pillow sat a piece of notepaper lined, torn from one of those spiral-bound journals she always carried around. The handwriting was hers, sharp, clear. "If you go, I go." That was all. No signature, no decoration, just the line sitting there like a decision already made. I stepped back quietly, heart tugged somewhere between sorrow and steel. I couldn't pull her into this, not yet, not like that. But I folded the note and slipped it into my sweater pocket anyway. The house felt hollow as I walked back downstairs, not quiet had a warmth to it. This was emptier than that, like the walls were holding their breath. I sat in my chair, the chair I still used since my rocker had been temporarily moved to the garage, and looked out the window toward the garden. The rosemary was still holding on despite the cold. I admired that about it. My phone buzzed, a message from Carol. "Ready when you are." I didn't reply, not yet. Instead, I picked up my planner, flipped to the next blank page, and wrote down a single word. Leave. Not because she asked me to. Because I already had, in all the ways that counted. And the next time Tessa walked into this kitchen, she'd realize too late, I didn't just leave the room. I left the game. And I took the board with me. April, I think. I'd just come home from work, grade papers still in my bag, heels blistering my feet, and a check in my hand that shook as I handed it over. Hello. An officer smiled politely, slid the receipt across the table. Congratulations, Mrs. Delaney, it's yours now. It didn't feel real, not yet. I remember walking out into the parking lot, sitting in the car with the engine off and staring out at the trees for a long time. I didn't cry. I just breathed deep, ragged, full, like I finally believed I could. Back then, the house was beige with green shutters, the porch sloped a little and the garden was more weeds than herbs. But it was mine, every corner of it earned in silence, in widowhood, in the kind of grit no one ever gave me credit for. Today, I stood at the end of the long gravel drive and stared at the mailbox. M&T Delaney. The metal letters stuck out, glossy and new, not crooked like the old ones, my name gone like it had never been there. I didn't touch it, I just let my eyes settle there long enough to memorize the insult. Inside, the scent hit me first, a soft citrus layered with artificial vanilla. Not mine, not even close. The framed cross-stitch I'd made in '96 was missing from the entryway. The coat rack was gone, the small shoe bench I refinished by hand replaced with something store-bought and smooth. I walked past the living room, trying not to notice the boxes stacked against the hallway wall, labeled in Miles' handwriting, Mom's books. Not Joan, not even Mom's library, just books. In the rocker, my rocker was gone from the sunroom. I knew where it was, of course. I'd seen it 2 weeks ago, shoved sideways behind a pile of dog food bags in the garage, blanket still folded neatly on the seat like it was waiting for permission to return. Hazel found me in the kitchen. "Grandma," she whispered, slipping a phone out of her sweatshirt. "I didn't want to show you, but I think you should see it." She hit play. Tessa's voice filled the room, cheerful, chipper, performative. "Welcome to our little nest in the Blue Ridge, so much character. It's a generational property passed down with love. Just wait till you see the light in this kitchen." The camera panned across my counters, my spice rack, the drawer where I used to keep Hazel's handwritten recipes. "Passed down," I said aloud, not even realizing. Hazel looked up, guilt flashing in her eyes. "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be." I took the phone, replayed the clip once more, then handed it back. "Keep a copy," I said, "just in case she forgets how much she rewrote." She nodded solemnly, didn't ask what I meant, she didn't need to. Later that night, I sat in the back bedroom, the one that used to be a guest room before it became my space. No photographs, no lamp I recognized. The closet had someone else's storage bins in it. I called Carol. She picked up on the second ring. "I assume this isn't a social call," she said. Her voice was low, measured, familiar. "No," I said, "it's a weather report." A pause, then "Storm's coming." "It's already here." There was a rustle of papers on her end. I could practically hear her reaching for the file folder I'd left with her last spring, just in case. "You still want to go through with this," she said, calm but firm, "or just burn it all down?" I looked around the room, at the neatly packed boxes, the scrubbed-away history, the stripped identity. "They already burned it," I said. "I'm just collecting the ashes." Carol exhaled, part sigh, part approval. "Then let's get to work." As I hung up, Hazel walked in, silent as ever, and set something on the dresser. It was a Polaroid, me and her in the garden last summer. She was barefoot, grinning. I was holding a basket of tomatoes. She didn't say anything, just walked back out. I stared at the photo for a long time, then placed it inside the drawer, carefully, reverently. This house was a home once. They treated it like a starter kit. But I built the foundation. And I wasn't done deciding what stayed standing. The house felt colder the next morning, though the thermostat hadn't changed. Maybe it was the quiet, the kind that settles in when something final starts shifting beneath the surface. I stood at the foot of the stairs, letting my eyes trace the hallway I'd walked thousands of times, every step carrying groceries, laundry, Christmas garland, sleepy Miles when he was small. Now I walked it empty-handed. I found the cardboard boxes stacked neatly in the closet beneath the stairs, plain brown, the kind movers use. I set the first one on the dining table and unfolded the flaps carefully. No rushing, no slamming. I wasn't giving this house the satisfaction of chaos. I wrapped each framed picture in tissue paper, the real ones, not the curated replacements Tessa hung for holiday aesthetics. My mother's tea set went next, piece by piece, cushioned in towels. Drawers opened and closed without sound. Every packed box felt like another stitch closing a wound. Around midday, I booked movers. A quiet click on my laptop, the confirmation email glowing on the screen like a contract with myself. They'd arrive 3 days from now. No announcement, no family meeting, no discussion. When I walked past the living room carrying another empty box, I saw Tessa leaning against the doorway, arms folded loosely like she imagined she was being casual. She watched me with that expression, the one that looked almost kind until you saw the calculation behind it. "Looks like you're getting organized," she said, tone syrupy enough to rot teeth. "We're glad you're making this healthy choice. It's good to see progress." Progress, another word she weaponized into virtue. I set the box on the table and met her eyes. It was overdue. Her smile brightened, relieved to hear what she interpreted as compliance. She probably couldn't wait to share her version of the story, the martyrdom of tolerating the difficult elderly mother-in-law, the heroism of boundaries and healing. She walked away humming, something upbeat, something smug. Hazel stood halfway up the staircase, small fingers curled around the railing. She didn't say anything, she rarely did when the air turned sharp like that, but her eyes followed every movement, wide and searching. I kept packing. Later, when I knelt beside an open suitcase arranging sweaters with almost ceremonial care, I felt her move closer. She crouched beside me, knees touching carpet, and slipped something into the side pocket without a word. I looked down, another Polaroid. Us again, same garden, same sunlit day, but this one was different. My arm around her shoulders, her head against mine, both of us laughing hard enough that the camera blurred slightly. I had forgotten that moment was captured. Hazel didn't explain, she didn't need to. She just squeezed my forearm once, then stood and walked away, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. The soft thud of her door closing was the loudest sound in the house. By evening, the dining room held 5 sealed boxes stacked neatly in a row. My handwriting on the sides, careful, unhurried, linens, frames, journals, archives, fragile. No one asked what I was taking, no one cared enough to wonder. The next morning, I drove into town. The roads curved through the trees, bare branches scraping November sky. The air felt cleaner the farther I got from the house. Carol's office sat near the courthouse brick building, wide windows, the smell of old paper and lemon oil drifting out when I opened the door. Her receptionist nodded and gestured me straight back. Carol was standing by the bookshelf, glasses low on her nose. When she saw the keyring in my hand, she didn't ask a single question. She just opened a drawer lined with neatly labeled folders. I placed the keys inside, not the house keys I'd always kept hidden under the ceramic bird on the porch, but the newer set with the shiny brass finish Tessa insisted on installing last year, the set that looked like ownership. They looked small sitting there on the navy felt lining, insignificant. Carol closed the drawer slowly. "It begins," she whispered. "It already has," I said. When I stepped back outside, the sky had shifted, clouds rolling low over the mountains, wind picking up leaves that skittered across the asphalt like warnings. I stood beside the car, hand on the door handle, and looked back at the building. Somewhere in my chest, something uncoiled, not relief, not victory, something steadier. Resolve. My phone buzzed in my bag, a message from Miles. "We need to talk tonight." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. They thought they were watching me leave. They hadn't realized yet. I was coming back. And I wasn't coming alone. The invitation never came, not as a text, not as a knock at the door, not as a whisper down the hallway, but I knew about the dinner. Of course I did. Tessa's smile showed up first 3 times in my feed that morning, bright and insistent. Her parents sat on either side of her at the long dining table I once refinished with my own hands. The caption read, "New beginnings with family and peace, grateful." The word peace had become her currency, traded freely, always at someone else's expense. I scrolled past the image, then turned off my phone and placed it face down on the table in the little cabin I'd rented just outside town. The walls were paneled in knotty pine, the kind you only find in rentals built before the age of Instagram. A wood-burning stove sat in the corner and the mattress creaked when I sat on it. I liked that. The drive up was quiet. No music, just the hum of tires and the occasional curve in the road that reminded me I was climbing into something older than all of us, these mountains, this ridge, this land. Tessa couldn't pretty that up for social media. The cabin was mine for 6 weeks, that's what I'd paid for, 6 uninterrupted weeks of silence, rest, and clarity. I planned to use every second of it. The first thing I unpacked was my journal. It was leather-bound, a gift from Hazel 3 birthdays ago. She scribbled in tea. He front cover, in case you ever want to write what nobody's saying. I opened to a clean page, dated the top, and let the pen settle in my fingers before I wrote a word. They wanted peace, I gave them the silence they earned. I underlined earned. That was the difference between what Tessa wanted and what she understood. She thought silence meant submission. She didn't know it could also be a weapon, cold, sharp, precise. Mid-afternoon, a photo came in from Hazel. No message, just the image, the living room stripped down in beige. My floral curtains were gone, replaced with gauzy white panels that looked like they belonged in a rental brochure. The walls, which used to hold family photos and childlike paintings, were now a flat, neutral beige, the kind of color that makes no statement at all. I looked at the photo for a long moment, then texted back, "Nice blank canvas. Funny how quiet beige can be." She didn't reply, she didn't need to. My phone rang an hour later. "Carol. Titles officially filed," she said without preamble. "Deed in your trust's name and all prior claims wiped clean, no transfer history to debate." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Good. There was a pause, then, "Want to wait on the next step?" "No," I said firm, "let's freeze the assets." Carol let out a quiet breath, part confirmation, part admiration. "You're sure?" "They made the dinner," I replied. "I'll send the bill." She chuckled. "I'll have the paperwork filed by morning." After we hung up, I stood at the tiny cabin window and watched the trees swaying, bare branches casting long shadows over the gravel path. It reminded me of the early winters when Miles was still small, when we'd rent VHS tapes and eat chili by the fire, when quiet still felt like company. I made tea and lit the fire. No dinner table, no guests, just me, the stove, and the kind of silence that doesn't ask for forgiveness. Later that evening, Hazel sent another message, just 5 words. "I saved your chair, Grandma." I stared at that sentence until my vision blurred. Then I closed the phone, set it aside, and picked up my pen again. At the bottom of the journal page, I added one more line. "Peace isn't passive." Then I drew a small checkmark beside it. The email came on a Tuesday, no subject line, just a forwarded Zillow link and a 1-line message from Tessa. "We're happy to buy you out, let us know your number." Buy me out. I read it 3 times, slow and deliberate, like I was reading a joke in another language. She sent it from her personal email with a digital signature at the bottom, her name, followed by MFT candidate, and a lotus flower emoji. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to Carol with a brief note. "Please handle no emotional language." An hour later, Carol's reply was in their inbox. Direct, surgical, and precise, a digital packet of documents Tessa wouldn't know how to argue with. The original title, the current deed, the updated trust file, and a notarized breakdown of sole ownership from 1991 to now. Everything dated, everything clean. Nothing ambiguous. My name was on every line. Tessa S., not a single place. No cosign, no gift, no transfer, no implied future claim. Nothing about this house ever legally belonged to her, or Miles for that matter. I imagined her sitting at the kitchen table I built, staring at her laptop, scrolling through each page, her jaw set tighter with every click, all that curated language about energy and peace dissolving into a quiet, panicked fury. I waited, not because I was anxious, but because I knew people like her didn't stay silent for long. 2 hours later, her response came. This feels unnecessarily aggressive. We're offering a generous amount. You said you wanted to leave peacefully. I typed one sentence. There is no current sale under consideration. Then I hit send and shut my laptop. Out the cabin window, the wind had shifted again, the kind of rustling that signaled a cold front moving in. I stepped outside and sat on the porch steps, mug of tea in hand, sweater pulled tight around my shoulders. Leaves danced across the gravel like they knew what was coming. My phone rang. Hazel. I answered immediately. She didn't say hello, just "Mom's freaking out." I didn't speak, just let the silence invite more. She said, "You're manipulating everything," Hazel went on, voice low and wary. "She's pacing around the kitchen like someone took the roof off the house. She kept saying she was supposed to be done. She gave up. She left." I sipped my tea. "She doesn't understand," Hazel said, softer now. "She thought this place was already hers, like the second you left it just changed hands." I exhaled, entitlement's loudest when it loses its echo. Hazel paused. "I told her you'd never given it away." I could hear her shifting in her seat, probably curled up in the corner of her room, notebook half open, voice shaky but steady. "She doesn't want you back," she said finally. "I know. She thinks you're punishing her." "I'm not," I said calmly. "I'm protecting what was already mine." There was silence, then a soft sniff. "She said you're not family anymore." I let that one sit in the air for a moment. "Hazel," I said gently, "sometimes the people who say that forget how much family they were only invited into." She didn't speak again, but I heard the rustle of paper, her journal maybe, and then the line went quiet. Later that night, I opened the fireproof folder I kept in my suitcase. I read every page again, trust documents, property filings, the letter of instruction I'd signed and left with Carol should anything happen to me. Every detail buttoned up, every asset locked, every exit accounted for. I picked up my pen and added one line to my journal. They thought silence meant surrender. I let them. Then I paused. Not because I didn't know what came next, but because I did. I waited until the weekend. The house would be full, Tessa's yoga mat rolled out in the den, Miles mowing the lawn he never wanted to pay someone for, Hazel journaling somewhere she thought no one could hear. I wanted the envelope to arrive when the illusion of normalcy was at its peak. Not because I wanted to startle them. Because I wanted them to feel the ground shift under them, not just around. The letter was short, one page printed in clean black font on linen paper, no drama, no color, just the facts. As legal sole owner of the property located at address redacted. As per the trust filed on date and reviewed by counsel. I am providing formal 30-day notice to vacate the premises. All communications moving forward will be directed through legal representation. I signed it in blue ink, folded it once, and slid it into the envelope with the weight of 3 decades. I made 2 copies, one was sent via certified mail. The other I had hand-delivered. Carol's courier, a polite man named Reggie with broad shoulders and a soft voice, walked up the driveway and taped it right to the front door. Right beneath the wreath Tessa had hung last week, an artificial olive branch shaped into a heart. It flapped slightly in the breeze. By the time the glue dried, so had the myth. I didn't have to wait long. Miles called just after noon. The second ring told me he was angry, the third told me he was confused. I answered on the fourth, letting the silence anchor me. "Mo. He said, already breathless, "what the hell is this?" His voice cracked like it did when he was 10, having dropped a baseball through the kitchen window. "It's a legal notice," I said, keeping my voice even. "Your wife wanted space, I've granted it." He didn't respond at first, then, "You can't just, this is our home." "No," I said, "it's mine, you were living in it." A long exhale. He wasn't used to me being blunt. I used to soften things, I used to shield him, but I didn't raise him to hide behind someone else's ambition. He lowered his voice. "Hazel's going to be crushed." I said nothing, because he knew as well as I did Hazel had already made her choice and she hadn't chosen beige walls and forced smiles. By sunset, I got the second call, this one from a different number. Tessa didn't bother with pretense. This is disgusting. Her voice shook, but it wasn't fear, it was disbelief. Her tone held the same energy of someone whose reservation got canceled and couldn't comprehend not being special. "We've built a life here," she snapped. "We've created a family, a rhythm, memories, and you're throwing us out like garbage." I didn't flinch. "I offered a life, you tried to edit me out of it. You're punishing us." "No," I said, keeping my tone clipped. "I'm drawing the line you begged me to respect." She hung up no goodbye. I stared out the window of the cabin, watching frost settle along the edges of the glass. The sun dipped behind the ridgeline like it was bowing out of something ugly. 10 minutes later, an email from Carol slid into my inbox. Subject: lease addendum confirmation. She'd attached the rental agreement Tessa signed 6 years ago when she and Miles moved in under the guise of temporary transition. Buried in the fine print was the clause Carol had added at my request: a standard month-to-month tenancy with revocation rights. Carol's note was brief. "She signed it, she's bound by it, we'll proceed." That night I made soup from scratch: lentils, carrot, garlic sautéed until it whispered memory. The kind Hazel used to call Sunday soup, because I always made it when the house was calm. My phone buzzed while the broth was simmering, a voice note from Hazel. I pressed play. "Thank you for not yelling," she said. Her voice was quiet, unsure, just doing what needed doing. I stood there, ladle in hand, steam rising up in slow spirals. "People like Mom think power is how loud you are," Hazel continued. "But you don't even raise your voice, you just move the earth." The message ended. I didn't play it again. Instead, I poured the soup, opened my journal, and wrote. She wanted a stage. I handed her a deadline. Tessa started with the dresser. Not the small one in the corner, they always leave that for last. She went straight for the 6-drawer oak chest against the wall, the one with the velvet-lined jewelry tray and the deep bottom drawer she once claimed was too bulky for the space. Now she was dragging it open so hard the handles clanged. Miles stood in the hallway, arms limp at his sides, watching like a child caught between the fire and the water. I wasn't there to see it, but Hazel was. She described it later in an email that read more like a field report than a plea. "She's yelling, slamming things," she said. "Your grandmother is trying to humiliate us." Hazel had added only one more line at the end. I stayed out of her way. Meanwhile, I was in the garden. My cottage had a narrow strip of soil behind the porch, nothing manicured, nothing symmetrical, just honest dirt and possibility. I had planted rosemary and thyme last week. Today I snipped a few sprigs of oregano, shaking the dirt off the roots as gently as if they were bones. Inside, soup simmered again, different recipe, simpler. I worked by instinct now. My phone buzzed on the windowsill. Carol. "Title freezes done," she said. "No liens, no second mortgages, no cash-out options, property S in lockdown." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "And Miles?" She hesitated. "He tried to access the 529. The savings account I opened when Hazel turned 2, I'd named him as the secondary administrator, a formality I'd thought at the time, a failsafe." Carol continued. "He didn't get far, the freeze held." My fingers tightened around the shears. "He wouldn't have touched it." "Maybe not for himself," she said carefully, "but desperation doesn't always knock first." I didn't reply, just turned back to the cutting board and sliced a tomato so cleanly it didn't make a sound. Later that night, Hazel emailed again, no attachment this time, just her own words, her own punctuation. "They keep saying you're punishing them, but I don't think that's what this is. I think you're teaching us something, even if it's hard." I stared at the screen long after the message ended. Her voice was in my head as clearly as if she were sitting across from me. I walked to the bookshelf in the corner and opened the old cigar box that held the last of Daniel's things: his wedding band, his badge from the school board, a pressed dogwood blossom from our first anniversary, and a candle. I struck a match and lit it, watching the flame wobble and catch, settling into a steady glow. "I promised I'd protect what we built," I said aloud. The room stayed still. The silence didn't feel empty. I sat on the bed, knees folded under me, and listened to the wind press against the windows. They were packing the master bedroom now. I could picture Tessa wrapping framed photos in hand towels, hurling blame like it was furniture. But that room was never hers. Not in name. Not in story. Not in spirit. She'd lived there, yes, but only like a tenant resenting the lease. I'd carried love through those halls, she'd carried expectations. And expectations had no key. My phone buzzed again, a name I hadn't seen since the night I left the house, Miles. I let it ring. Outside, the wind shifted again, sharper now, like a warning whispered through the branches. I didn't need to listen to Miles to know what was coming next. I'd taken the house. Now they'd try to take the story. The invitation came in an envelope that looked like it was trying too hard to be neutral, cream-colored cardstock, centered text. The return address was some wellness center nestled between a Pilates studio and a custom cupcake shop downtown. Family Systems Mediation, a safe space to reconnect with intention. Inside, a printed letter from the therapist, typed but signed in blue ink. It mentioned concern for ongoing family discord, emotional safety, and a desire to explore reconciliation before further legal proceedings escalate. Below, in careful handwriting, a single note. Tessa hopes this can begin a healthier chapter. No mention of Miles. No mention of Hazel. Just Tessa. I set the letter down beside my teacup and stared out the window of the cottage where the frost was starting to gather on the rosemary I'd planted 2 weeks earlier. Resilient little thing, still holding on even when it had every reason not to. I didn't respond. Carol did. She sent a brief, perfectly worded email to the therapist's office the next morning, CCing Tessa and the mediator. The tone was not hostile, it was precise. Mrs. Delaney will not be attending any informal family discussions, mediated or otherwise, while formal legal processes are active. All communication moving forward must be directed to this office. Carol didn't add her usual best or warm regards, just her name typed clean and cold beneath the firm's letterhead. That same afternoon, a text came in from Hazel. A photo this time, a page from her mother's notebook left open on the kitchen table. I zoomed in. In Tessa's handwriting, underlined twice. She's mentally unwell, emotional manipulation masked as calm, classic narcissism, need third-party witness. The ink was fresh. I didn't reply, Hazel knew I'd seen it. That evening, Carol called. They're pushing for in-home mediation, she said, claiming you're refusing healing opportunities. I let out a soft breath through my nose. Did you send the response? I did. And I filed a cease and desist. I closed my eyes for a moment and nodded. Good. She's building a narrative, Carol said gently, playing therapist now instead of lawyer. It's not about fairness, it's about optics. She's always needed a role, I said, and someone to cast against. You make a difficult villain, Carol mused, too quiet. Quiet enough to hear what she really wants. The line went still. Later, I opened the basket I kept near the fireplace and pulled out the stationery Hazel had given me for Christmas. She designed it herself, soft linen paper, a faded dogwood flower printed in the corner, and a simple header, from Joan's kitchen desk. That week I sent Hazel 2 letters. The first had a recipe for the molasses cookies she loved. I wrote it the way I always had, with instructions like stop stirring when the dough listens and press with the back of the spoon, not the front, trust me. The second had a story from when Miles was 12 and tried to build a go-kart out of lawn furniture and leftover plywood. It was a mess, but he was proud of it. I made sure she knew that part. I signed both letters with my full name and a PS. Real stories don't need filters. I mailed them before the next frost. A week passed. No new notices. No therapy follow-ups. Just one more envelope slipped into my mailbox, this time without a return address. Inside, a single printed page. The therapist's letterhead, one line circled in red ink. Joan's refusal to engage may suggest unresolved grief or emotional rigidity. And under it, in someone else's handwriting, Might need capacity eval. The question mark was what chilled me. Not the threat. The suggestion. The paperwork arrived in a flat navy binder, no frills, no flourish, just a clean seal pressed into the corner, Delaney Family Trust. Carol insisted on a curry. Rather than email, some documents deserve to be held, she'd said. I waited until the kettle clicked off before opening it. Steam curled around my fingers as I blew gently across the top of the mug. I set the tea beside the binder, then flipped it open. The pages felt heavier than paper, like they carried something warm and alive beneath the type. At the very top of page 1. Irrevocable trust agreement. Designated beneficiary, Hazel Rose Delaney. Not contingent, not conditional, not shared. Hazel alone. I let my hand rest on the words a moment longer than necessary. The cabin was silent except for the faint clicking of the heater, the wind wrapping around the eaves like hands knocking gently. Carol called just after 9. It's done, she said. Official as of 8:03 a.m. No contesting it without grounds. She'll try, I said. She already did, Carol replied. Paper rustled on her end. Tessa filed an emergency challenge this morning, claimed emotional coercion, diminished capacity, failure to disclose marital equity. And denied within 5 minutes, she said, almost smiling through the phone. Judge didn't even request rebuttal. She has no legal footing, no marital claim, no financial contribution, nothing in writing. The trust stands. I closed the binder gently. Thank you. One more thing, Carol added. Given the attempt to challenge, I added a protective clause. If she tries again, and she will, the property's rental value automatically diverts to the Asheville Unified School Foundation. The school I'd given 37 years to, where I'd spent snow days shoveling walkways before my teachers arrived, where children still sent me Christmas cards addressed simply to Principal D. A quiet warmth spread through me, not triumph, something steadier, something ancestral. Good call, I said. I thought so, she murmured. People who take without earning rarely understand how many hands built the structure they're standing in. After we hung up, the phone was still warm in my hand when it rang again, this time a number I knew without needing to look. Miles. I let it ring once before answering, gentle but firm. Hello, Miles. There was a long silence on the other end, a breath, a swallow, the sound of someone trying to gather language that kept slipping through his fingers. I need to ask you something, he said quietly, not angry, not defensive, just tired. Can we undo this? Not all the way, just enough so Hazel doesn't get stuck in the middle. I closed my eyes. She's not stuck. She's standing exactly where she chose to stand. She's 12, Mom, he whispered. She shouldn't have to choose. She didn't, I said. You did, and so did Tessa. He didn't argue. That's how I knew he understood more than he wanted to. At last he spoke again, softer now. For Hazel's sake, please. I swallowed once. This is for Hazel, that's why you're not on it. The line went dead. Not abruptly, just slowly, like air leaving a balloon you already know won't float again. Less than 10 minutes passed before Hazel called. Not text, not email, a real call. When I answered, I heard nothing first, just shaky breath, then a quiet sob, small and muffled like she was trying to keep it trapped. What has happened? I asked gently. Silence. Then in pieces, Mom, she threw a mug at the cabinet, it shattered. She was screaming that you're ruining everything. Dad tried to stop her and she shoved him and she stopped, breath hitching. The cabinet door is broken, she punched it hard. I listened, I didn't rush her. She kept yelling that you tricked her, that you stole what she deserved. Not earned. Deserved. I closed my eyes. Hazel's voice wavered. I'm sorry, I tried to leave the room but she followed me. She said you manipulated me. She said she's the only one protecting me. My hands tightened into fists around the phone. Where are you now? I asked. In my closet, she whispered. I locked the door. Dad's outside telling her to calm down. She won't. I exhaled slowly, controlled. You're safe, stay where you are. She sniffed and the sound broke something open inside me. Grandma. Yes. Please don't stop, whatever you're doing, don't stop. The words crackled through the speaker like static and truth twisted into one. Outside the window, the wind slammed against the siding hard enough to rattle the frame. A storm was finally arriving. And this time I wasn't moving. I waited until a Tuesday. School hours, mid-morning, when I knew Hazel would be safely tucked behind a desk and Tessa would be at her yoga co-op rewriting her narrative between deep breaths and chai lattes. The driveway looked different in daylight, too clean, too quiet. The wreath was gone now, replaced with a brushed steel welcome sign that felt about as warm as a bank lobby. I didn't knock. I still had my own key, not the new one with the brass finish, mine, old and worn and shaped by years of habit. It turned without hesitation. Inside, the silence didn't greet me, it tolerated me. The house smelled like lemongrass and detergent, too polished for a home, like they were trying to scrub the memories out of the walls. I moved quickly, efficiently. I wasn't here for confrontation, I was here for extraction. The last things I hadn't packed during the first quiet exit: an old quilt, a lidded basket, 2 framed watercolors from the upstairs hallway, and my recipe cards still tucked in the kitchen drawer beneath the junk mail. I started in the study. Every single framed photo had been replaced. Newer prints, staged smiles, Tessa's parents, their matching holiday pajamas, Hazel looking stiff in a too bright dress, Miles in the background, half faded in every frame. Except one. I found it in the bottom drawer of the old sideboard, half buried beneath candles and broken charging cords. A photo of me holding Hazel when she was 3, flour on her nose, cookie dough on my cheek. We were laughing, unposed. Real. I held it in my hand for a long time, then carefully peeled back the backing, slid the picture out and placed it in the envelope I'd brought with me. Then from my coat pocket I took a small yellow sticky note and wrote in neat, even print. History isn't optional. I left it in the now empty frame and placed it back exactly where it had been. By the time I reached the front hallway, I heard the faint clatter of a garbage truck down the road. I took that as my cue. On the way out, I stopped in the kitchen. The drawers were rearranged, silverware perfectly aligned, my worn potholders replaced with monogrammed ones. But there in the cabinet above the sink were the dishes I'd bought at a church rummage sale in '92, the ones Tessa had called visually chaotic. I boxed them. I didn't want them returned to me, I wanted them repurposed, a clean cut from a home that had twisted into something I no longer recognized. Back at the cottage, I set the box down on the porch and labeled it with black marker. Donation, do not return to sender. Then I sat down with a pen and addressed a small envelope to Hazel's school. Inside it, I placed the photo of us baking and a short note. Just in case someone tries to erase the good parts, love, Grandma. By dinner, I was sautéing onions when my phone buzzed again. Hazel. A single photo. It was the empty frame, the post-it I'd left behind, her fingers visible at the edge as if she just pulled it from the shelf and wasn't sure if she was allowed to keep it. I texted back, yes. She didn't say anything else. I imagined her tucking it into her notebook between the pages she didn't share with anyone else. Later that night, I opened Instagram. I didn't usually, but sometimes storms are easier to watch from a distance. Tessa had posted a photo of her holding a mug, white ceramic, gold lettering, captioned, "Some people thrive on bitterness, I choose peace." It had 36 likes, all mutual acquaintances, people who didn't ask questions. I closed the app. Then I pulled out another empty box. Linens, dishes, cookbooks, all the pieces I didn't want mistaken for inheritance. Tomorrow, I'd drop them at the women's shelter Carol worked with on weekends, the ones who knew the difference between quiet and submission. But tonight I packed slowly. Not to delay. To savor. Because when I took those photos back, I didn't just reclaim my place. I reclaimed the proof. And the story was finally mine again. The voicemail came just after sunrise. Blocked number, male voice, too rehearsed to be spontaneous, too smug to be professional. "This is a courtesy call," he began, like I should thank him for what was coming next. Tessa's family has growing concerns about your well-being. If we don't hear from you within 48 hours, we'll be forced to contact Adult Protective Services. This can all go away with one reasonable conversation. Don't make us escalate it. I listened to it once, then again. And then I forwarded it to Carol. Her reply came back less than 5 minutes later. No greeting, just one line. Recording saved. I'll begin documentation and file harassment paperwork this afternoon. I made a note in my journal, under the page titled Things They Think I Won't Answer. Legal threats from relatives I've never shared a meal with. Questions wrapped in fake concern. Men who mistake their tone for authority. That evening I went to the church potluck. It was chilly night. 3 crockpots lined up in the fellowship hall, each with little paper labels, mild, medium, and Brother Charles Firestarter. I brought cornbread, still warm from my oven. No one asked me about legal filings. No one brought up Tessa or Miles or the mug she threw or the frame I took back. They just asked if I'd heard that Carla from the quilting circle had finally remarried, if I had a good lemon bar recipe, if I'd seen the Christmas play schedule yet. I hadn't laughed that hard in weeks. On the way home, the sky was full of stars and the kind of quiet that doesn't feel lonely. My phone buzzed, a text from Miles. Please just stop, we'll move. No punctuation, no signature, like that would soften the guilt. I read it at the red light near the edge of town, then typed my reply without thinking. You already did when you didn't speak. I didn't wait for a response, I didn't expect one. The next morning, I was sweeping the front porch of the cottage when Hazel's name lit up on my phone. Not a call, just a message. Can I come for spring break? No emoji, no explanation, just the question stripped down to what mattered. I stared at it for a moment, heart tightening, then I walked back inside and opened the linen closet, pulled out the good sheets, the ones with the dogwood pattern, and laid them over the twin bed in the guest room, the one I hadn't made up in weeks. I fluffed the pillow, opened the window a crack, lit the cinnamon candle she once said reminded her of when she was 5. I didn't reply to her message just yet. Because sometimes the answer is already written in the room you prepare. Later that afternoon, Carol called. Her voice was even, but I heard the edge beneath it. Tessa's cousin is a financial advisor with a revoked license and 3 pending civil complaints, she said. I've logged the call, pulled the background, and filed a protective incident report. Anything else? I asked. Just a note from the clerk, she added. The language in the voicemail could be interpreted as coercion. If they push it, we counter with elder harassment and slander. Your capacity has never been in question. Not by anyone that matters, I said. She chuckled. That's what I told the clerk. After we hung up, I opened my journal and added one more entry under the same page. Men who think threatening a woman with paperwork means she'll fold. Then I underlined it twice. That night, I pulled Hazel's photo from the side table and placed it beside the guest bed, tucked her favorite blanket, the soft fleece one from 2 Christmases ago, into the corner of the footboard. I opened the window again, just an inch, enough for her to feel the mountain air when she arrived. Because she would arrive. And I would be ready. But just as I turned off the lamp, my phone lit up one more time. A new message from an unfamiliar number. She doesn't deserve Hazel, you know that, right? No name, no context, just that sentence. I stared at it, heart suddenly cold. Because for the first time, it wasn't a threat. It was a confession. I didn't expect to find anything. Carol had arranged the timing perfectly. Keys turned in, utilities forwarded, new address on file. What was left in that house wasn't mine anymore, just echoes, dust, and a few legally required notices for final inspection. But when I stepped through the door, my old door with a lock that no longer recognized me, the first thing I saw was a piece of paper on the counter. Tessa's handwriting. I knew it immediately, curved, stylized, too controlled to be casual, the kind of handwriting that wanted to be mistaken for grace. The note sat precisely in the center of the granite island, framed by nothing, like she wanted it to be art or evidence. We hope you're proud of what you've done. No signature, no love, not even her name. Just that single line. I didn't touch it right away. I stood in the foyer, still barefoot from slipping out of my shoes at the door out of habit, and let my eyes rest on the spot where Daniel's urn used to sit. Right there on the antique chest we bought in Asheville on our 25th anniversary. The spot had been scrubbed clean, the furniture gone, a pot of faux succulents sat in its place. Something about that stung more than the letter. When I finally stepped forward, I folded the note in half, then again, a third time. The creases were crisp, purposeful. I didn't sigh, I didn't cry, I didn't need to. I opened my bag, slid the paper into my journal between the entry about the voicemail and the one labeled things that are said when they know they've lost. Then I turned off the lights and pulled the door closed behind me. The next morning, Carol called just after breakfast. "All locks changed," she reported. "New codes, fresh hardware, documentation filed with the assessor. They'll receive a certified letter confirming no further access." I nodded, sipping my tea at the small table by the window. The rosemary outside had started to bloom again, just small buds, but enough to notice. "In the note?" I asked. Carol's voice didn't waver. "Already logged, just in case they try to claim abandonment of property or coercion later." "Good." She paused. "You okay?" "Yes," I said simply, and it was the truth. Not because it didn't ache, but because ache is the price of choosing not to disappear. Later that afternoon, I went to the kitchen and pulled out the cast iron skillet, the one Daniel always said gave the cornbread real spine. I greased it with butter, humming under my breath, a song I hadn't thought of in years. Hazel used to call it Grandma's song, but it was older than both of us, something I used to sing when Miles was 5 and life was built around nap schedules and grocery lists and the smell of cinnamon. I had just slipped the skillet into the oven when my phone buzzed. "Voicemail, Hazel." I wiped my hands and tapped play. Her voice was soft, breathy, like she'd waited until no one could hear. "The house doesn't feel like a home anymore." A pause, a shaky breath. "But you still do." That was all. The oven timer ticked in the background, steady and sure. The air smelled like butter and honey and memory. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I set out 2 plates, one for me, one for her. Just in case she came early. Just in case she needed proof that home had never been a structure. That night, after the dishes were done and the windows locked, I sat by the fire and opened the folded note one last time. "We hope you're proud of what you've done." I wrote beneath it in ink neat and clear. "I am." Then I closed the journal. Outside, the mountains were silent. But something was beginning to echo. Not anger. Not guilt. Not regret. Legacy. And this time it had my name on it. Carol brought the documents in a red envelope this time. Not legal red, cherry, almost cheerful. She said it felt right. Not all decisions have to look like battle flags, she'd told me over the phone. Inside, a final amendment to the trust. The successor trustee designation, official, notarized, filed, and sealed. Hazel Rose Delaney, sole named heir of the house, land, and legacy. I read it once, slowly, then again, just to let it settle in my bones. I didn't need to underline anything. The words already felt carved. When I slipped the document into the fireproof safe beside my bed, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt anchored, like something old had finally clicked into place. That afternoon, the mail arrived with a letter postmarked in Hazel's handwriting. No stamp from her school, just the return address written carefully in blue pen. Inside, folded crisply, 2 pages of loose-leaf paper lined and neat. "Dear Grandma, thank you for not letting love be confused with tolerance. And for showing me that silence isn't always strength, but sometimes it's strategy." She'd drawn a tiny dogwood in the corner, a callback, a promise. "I used to think home was a place you earned by being quiet enough not to get kicked out. But now I know it's the place that doesn't make you shrink. I love you. Hazel." I ran my finger over her name, feeling the pressure in the ink. It was bold, intentional, the kind of signature that doesn't expect to be erased. 2 days later, Miles found out. Carol said he came by the county office unannounced, trying to request the trust summary as next of kin. The clerk showed him the successor designation. Carol said he didn't speak for a full minute, just nodded once and walked out. She also said she overheard him telling Tessa. Apparently, she didn't say anything back. And then for 3 days, she said nothing at all. I didn't ask for updates, I didn't need them. That silence had its own shape, the kind that comes not from disbelief but from recognition. Hazel arrived that Friday with an overnight bag and a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked from the field behind her school. She slept until nearly noon the next day. No alarm, no one knocking on her door to ask if she'd started her chores, just sunlight, warm blankets, and the cinnamon candle I'd kept burning in her room since she'd asked to come. We had pancakes late, she ate 3. Then we walked the ridge trail behind the cottage where the leaves had started to turn copper and gold, clinging to the branches like they had something left to say. She kicked a pine cone down the path ahead of us, hands buried in her sleeves. I let her lead. When we reached the edge of the clearing, I stopped. The cottage stood behind us, strong and still. The mountains ahead were dusted with morning haze like breath caught between seasons. I reached into my coat pocket and handed her the key, not a ceremonial one, not polished, just mine, old and scratched, the metal worn where I used to clip it to my lanyard during snow days. She turned it over in her palm. "You'll never have to ask anyone to stay here," I said. "It'll be yours." Hazel blinked hard, the wind caught her hair and her breath in the same instant. Then she looked up at me, really looked, and wrapped her arms around my middle. Not a polite hug. A held hug, a grounding one. She pressed her cheek into my coat and whispered, "I already feel like it is." Later that evening, she helped me fold the laundry, singing softly under her breath to the same old Motown playlist I'd forgotten was still saved on my phone. The cornbread was already cooling. The porch light flicked on automatically. And for the first time in years, every door in the house felt unlocked, even the ones we hadn't opened yet. Before bed, she slipped a note onto the corner of my journal. I read it after she fell asleep. "We don't choose where we come from, but we can choose what we carry forward. Thank you for choosing me." I stared at the sentence, heart full, lungs still. Because she didn't say, "You saved me." And she didn't say, "You fixed it." She said, "You chose me." And after a lifetime of being edited out. That was the only inheritance I'd ever wanted to leave. The news came through Hazel, not Carol. Just a short text on a quiet Thursday morning, sandwiched between a picture of the oatmeal she'd made and a screenshot of a new playlist. Mom moved back in with Nana plus Papa, said she needed space. No explanation, no drama, just that one line offered like weather. I didn't reply right away. Outside, the early sun had just begun warming the porch. I was already on my knees, gently patting new soil around a ring of lavender, not the ornamental kind Tessa used to order in ceramic pots, but real lavender, the sort you can touch, dry, and trust. It was the first plant I'd put in this garden. With full intention, no metaphor, just roots in earth and something that could outlast a frost. I brushed dirt from my palms and sat back on my heels. Let her have her space, I thought. I wasn't standing in it anymore. Carol arrived just after lunch, a bottle of wine under one arm and her coat slung over the other. She didn't knock, she never did now. "I brought a red," she said, handing it over like it was a congratulations. "What's the occasion?" I asked, though I already had a guess. "You made case law," she grinned. "Did you know that?" I raised an eyebrow. "The Delaney Trust structure," she said, pulling 2 glasses from the cupboard without asking. "It's already being referenced in 3 other filings. Some young associates are calling it the Velvet Hammer, protective, quiet, and impossible to challenge." I poured the wine. "I didn't make law, Carol." She clinked her glass against mine. "You made a point." We drank to that and then some. By sunset, we were both seated on the porch, watching the ridge turn gold. "You regret anything?" she asked. "Not yet." "You waiting for the regret or just leaving room?" I smiled faintly. "I'm just letting it know it's not invited." She chuckled and sipped her wine. The air was cooler than I expected. That in-between chill that tells you fall's not asking permission anymore, it's just arriving. The next day, Hazel sent an email. No subject line, just a photo attachment. It was the Polaroid from last summer, the one I thought had gotten lost in a drawer somewhere. We were both in it. Hair pulled back, sun in our eyes, 2 glasses of tea balanced on the porch rail, my arm around her shoulder, her smile like she just remembered something good. In the picture, we looked almost alike. Below it, she typed, "Framed it, it's above my desk. I look at it when I need to remember I'm allowed to be whole." I stared at the screen, hand resting on the edge of my tea mug, not moving for a long time. Later that evening, I added a new entry to my journal. Not about Tessa. Not about Miles. Not even about the photo. Just a short, quiet sentence. Peace isn't what they gave me. It's what they couldn't take. Carol left the wine bottle half full on the counter before heading out, said she had a court date in the morning and didn't want to be too sharp. After she left, I walked through the house turning off lights, humming softly Hazel's favorite lullaby when she was little, the one about the evening star and pine needles. I stopped at the bookshelf and ran my finger over the spine of Daniel's old poetry collection. For a moment, I imagined him standing in the kitchen doorway again, arms crossed, smiling like he used to when I outmaneuvered the school board without raising my voice. "You always were the quiet storm," he'd say, "but only when they deserved it." I whispered into the dark, "You should see her now." But I knew he already did. And then I heard it, a knock. Soft. Measured. Like someone testing whether the door still opened at all. I stood still, hand on the knob. Because I had peace now. And not everyone gets to walk back into it. The table wasn't fancy. Mismatched plates, a woven runner Hazel made in 7th grade, napkins folded in triangles because that's how my mother used to do it. The cornbread was warm, the cobbler cooling beside it, sweet tea in tall mason jars sweating gently in the mountain air. Carol brought pickled okra, Hazel brought her appetite, I brought the kind of ease you can't fake. We didn't pray out loud, we didn't need to. It was enough just to sit 3 generations of women who had learned, through vastly different means, that boundaries weren't walls. They were welcome mats turned right side up. After the second helping of cobbler, Carol leaned back in her chair and sighed, "This might be the most peaceful meal I've had since law school." Hazel grinned, "That's because no one here's trying to prove anything." "I'm always proving something," Carol muttered, but she was smiling. "I just don't need to win at dinner." Hazel raised her glass, to not needing to win. We clinked sweet tea instead of wine, that felt right too. After dessert, Hazel helped me clear the table, then wandered back toward the sunroom with a book tucked under her arm. She paused in the doorway and looked around, not like a guest surveying a space, but like someone already making memories out of the angles. "This house doesn't feel like a rental anymore," she said softly. I glanced over. She shrugged, "I think it just feels like home." I didn't answer right away, but I saw the way her shoulders dropped, how she let the silence settle without needing permission to fill it. That was new. That was everything. Later that night, after the dishes were done and Carol had gone home with a Tupperware full of leftovers and a second slice of cobbler for legal stamina, I pulled out my journal. Not the fireproof one, not the one with case notes or voicemail transcripts or trust am. And ments. The small one. The one with recipes and flower sketches and sentences written for no one but me. I flipped to the last page. Peace is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of self. I closed it gently, the leather worn soft from honest use. The next morning, Hazel headed out for a field trip. She waved from the porch without hesitation, without glancing back to see if she'd forgotten anything. She hadn't. An hour later, I opened Instagram. Tessa's page was quiet. Not archived, not deleted, just still. No new posts, no curated captions. The last photo, her holding that mug about bitterness and peace, was now over a month old, no replies to the comments. The silence didn't feel strategic, it felt surrendered. I logged off. Around mid-afternoon, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A car door, footsteps, then a single knock, low, steady, familiar. I opened the door. Miles stood on the porch, alone, no suitcase, no script, just a worn hoodie and that posture he always had when he was 5 and trying not to cry over things he couldn't fix. "Hi," he said. I stepped aside. "Come in, it's chilly." He did, sat at the table where Hazel had eaten pancakes the day before, looked down at his hands. I poured tea, not as a gesture of forgiveness, just hospitality. He didn't ask for sugar. "I read the trust summary," he said eventually. I waited. "I don't agree with everything," he added, "but I get it. I think deep down I always did." I nodded. "That's not nothing." He looked up at me. "Is there a way back?" I didn't smile, I didn't soften, I just handed him the tea. "There's a way forward," I said, "but it doesn't loop back through what you let happen." He held the mug but didn't drink. "I just miss when things were easy." "They were never easy," I said, "you just didn't have to notice." He didn't stay long. No fight, no tears, just a quiet goodbye and a heavy exhale as he walked back down the steps. I watched him go, then turned back to the sink. Washed his cup, set it on the drying rack, lit a candle. That night I slept with the windows open, even though the air had turned brisk. Let the wind move through the room without asking permission. And before bed, I wrote one final line at the very back of the journal. "She told me to leave for peace." I left and took it with me.